this will be kind of fun. We're going to do some experimentation with some adjuncts. Dean from Ale Asylum is going to be really disappointed in you, Jim. But
okay.
And just to throw some of Dean's words back at him, these are non-fermentable adjuncts, so they count.
You could ferment maple syrup.
Oh, shit, this is fermentable. Yeah, Dean's pissed at us.
I knew if I let it record, Jim was going to be wrong. So
I think that might be the cold open.
Cheers.
You stumbled on into the Tap Takeover Podcast.
It's so big. Like, so big.
All right, welcome back to the Tap Takeover Podcast, and we're sitting down at Mobcraft Brewing yet again. We made the joke the last time around that we're here at the scene of the crime of the last interview. We're literally in the room where the crime happened. I can still see the chalk outline. This is a really exciting one for us. We're here to do a live tasting of our beer, our collaboration beer with Mobcraft. It's everything that we thought it could be. And Jim, I want to hear from you especially. You weren't there for the first one, but you had a big hand in coming up with some of the recipe aspects and some of the boil temps. Tell us what you think, your first impressions.
Clearly my mark's on this beer. It's got a great body on it. The oats are really letting to the body. We missed our final gravity on this pilot batch a little bit. It just tend to happen in these 5-gallon batches, thrown in a carboy, but so it's tasting a little sweet, but we're really getting a sense of that Maris Otter coming through in the bouquet and the kind of bread characteristics. Getting some of the chocolate malts that we have from Proximity Malt and some of the Patagonia C170.
All right, and absolutely great description. I want to bring Henry and Andrew in on this because Jim did some of the mental lifting, but you guys did the hard work on this thing. So tell us what you guys think. As far as hitting the mark, do you think we nailed it, or is there a little work to be done?
I think, barring the fact that it finished out like fermenting a little too high, it's a little bit too sweet, but I think other than that, I think we're right on target. My only thing would be to see the beer dry out a little bit more, and then we'll get a little bit more of that roasty character coming through, we'll get a little bit of more of that malt character coming through. And then after that, the only thing we would have to decide is how we're going to handle these ingredient additions.
Can I give in my 2 cents as well?
Have at it.
All right. Well, the first thing that I love about this beer is it's so viscous. It's so thick. It's like midnight, which when we were talking about this beer, we joked a couple times about a 2% ABV dark beer, because that's what you guys just said you wanted a dark beer.
Yeah,
and this is definitely not that. I mean, you can almost chew this, and I love it. I mean, this is a perfect stout. Once it drops off and gets a little bit more of that sugar eaten up by the yeast, we'll see this beer dry out, and that'll take some of that residual sweetness out, and then I think it'll be pretty spot on pre-flavor addition. So.
Yeah, the SRM is exactly where I was hoping it would be. It's fantastic. So as far as color and that lovely brown head, I mean, when you really get a great stout that's really got some great malt in it, that head turns from white to brown, and that's when you know you really got something special going on.
Yeah, I've got about less than a half inch of beer in my glass, and I can't even see light through it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing that it has this big a head on an uncarbonated beer. We have not crashed this beer yet. This is just natural carbonation from the yeast doing its thing right there, and it's already coming off pretty nice. So I have big hopes for this one. Jesus, what are you thinking here? As it warms up a bit, are you picking up some different notes?
Well, I do taste the sweetness, and I guess I don't have a home brewing background, and I've never had it right after it was done. I taste a lot of that sweetness, and I'm kind of hesitant of adding more, maple. Mm-hmm. Even the fenugreek you're saying that would be a little bit less, but I feel like it's pretty sweet right now, and I guess I've never had it, kind of what Jim was saying, that it would just die off some.
Yes, it's really hard to taste a beer and then imagine a beer without something in it if you've never done that before. One thing that we'll do often here is we taste beer always. So we're developing sensory when beer hasn't fermented, when it's fermented for a day, when it's fermented for a week. So we always know in the back of our brain, I taste this now, I can eliminate these couple flavors or experiences in my palate to know what that end result is going to be. And until you do that a million times, it's pretty hard to figure that out.
So to you, it's not that sweet, right?
It's definitely sweet, but then I'm getting past the fact of I know what will happen if a couple gravity points drop.
Okay.
I know where that sweetness will be, and that really dissipates.
It's going to allow all the rest of that malt and the beer to shine. Like that's just like the more sweetness you take out of a beer, the more complexity you bring out just from the malts, within reason, of course. You don't want a super, super dry, like Irish stout, super strong beer. That's just, I mean, we're going for balance here, but I think we can all unanimously agree it's a little too sweet. The only thing I would suggest is maybe in the boil, subbing out all the brown sugar for maple syrup in the boil, and then from there we can play around with either adding fenugreek or adding other flavors to kind of kick this beer into high notch.
The hard part about the maple is, like, we've got to ferment it out for the most part. So if you ferment out maple syrup, what are you left with? You know, fermented maple syrup, which does not taste as much like maple syrup as normal maple syrup does.
Depends on how much maple syrup you add.
Yeah. Drums and
If
drums.
if the beer is 1/3 maple syrup, it's going to end up tasting like maple syrup no matter what you do.
So, Andy, I think you've tried more big stouts, more big name big stouts than all of us combined. What do you think of this one? Is this hitting your big stout-o-meter?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the viscosity on it is what I love to see in a big stout, and we definitely have this here. It clings to the glass. I mean, if we add carbonation to this, you're going to get lacing all the way down the glass, and it's just going to be huge. I think it's going to taste delicious once we, figure out the additions and bring down the sweetness level on it.
Yeah, what I'm most excited about is even with the little the attenuation that's we're missing on, the complexity of the malts is there. And that's what I was really hoping for when we went from this pretty unusual grist bill. I mean, you look at it on the pre-order page, there's a long list of grist on here. So that was super exciting that you guys were along on this journey for us to say, we really want a complex beer, and it's going to require a lot of crazy malts. And you guys are all
7 different specialty malts and 2 different kind of base malts. And 3 different DME editions.
Yeah, and some sugar and adjuncts to go in. What the heck?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that we definitely love being open source to say if you want to brew any of these beers, you can. So this recipe right now is up on our website, and you can go and try to brew your own batch if you want.
So if you're listening right now, it's available for pre-order already. The big batch hasn't even been made.
Yeah, so get yours now, and you don't even have to stand in line.
So I have a question going along with what Andy was saying about that viscosity, that thickness. And I think when we were talking earlier, adding maple was going to give more of that.
That was one of the original reasons I think we were talking about adding maple syrup, was as a way to add sweetness, but then we were also talking about throwing brown sugar in the boil, and I think we really have to pick between one or the other at this point. It's like either we add brown sugar or we add maple syrup.
So if we did the maple syrup instead of the brown sugar, would that still leave like a hint of the maple flavor?
Absolutely.
And it's just going to give you the sweetness that we're not
like just like the
take
same
from
way
brown
when I'm
sugar.
tasting this beer, I get a little bit of like a molasses character.
Yeah.
We would get that same similar, background flavor from, even though most of the maple syrup would have fermented out, we'll still get some of that character pulling through.
And that'll just add on to the coffee we're going to put in it too, right?
Well, and so that's a whole other thing, because in like 2 minutes here, I'm going to give you guys some samples of some coffee beers that we do, and the way we add coffee, it produces a very, very, very intense coffee flavor. So, I mean, we'll get a chance to try some of that in a little bit, and you guys can get an idea of just how much coffee we have the ability to put in. If we can make it less, like if we add the coffee in during the boil, which is what a lot of breweries will do, we could absolutely like reduce that, but like this is like, it all depends on how intense you guys like your coffee beers.
Well,
Pretty intense.
yeah, pretty intense, but do we really want to overwhelm, the roasters?
We're definitely shooting for balance here on this beer. Even though it's
Yep.
a big beer, it's really all about the balance. The balance of the malts to bring complexity. The coffee's another bit of complexity. The maple, a little bit more complexity in there, but we really want, at the end of the day, balance, because those are the best beers.
Yep. Yeah, from our first talk, we're not trying to make a cake beer.
No,
we're not
it's
trying to
not
make a
about
dessert beer.
pastry
This is
stout.
a
It's not a
this
pastry
is
stout,
stout. And it's got some fun ingredients that all contribute in their own little way. You can detect them, but it's not like this is a maple syrup pancake stout.
Yeah, so this will be kind of fun. We're going to do some experimentation with some adjuncts. Dean from Ale Asylum is going to be really disappointed in you, Jim. But it's going to be kind of fun. We're going to try a little bit with the fenugreek, a little bit with the maple syrup, and kind of find out which road we want to take this recipe in.
Before we do that, though, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab some of our coffee beer right out of the tank so we can try that and just get an idea of where we want the coffee to be and what we're capable of doing. So I'll be right back, guys.
What are you going to grab? Dudeism, okay.
And just to throw some of Dean's words back at him, these are non-fermentable adjuncts, so they count.
You could ferment maple syrup.
Oh shit, this is fermentable. Yeah, Dean's pissed at
See,
us.
I knew if I let it record, Jim was going to be wrong. So that's why
might be the cold open.
So the beer that you guys are about to taste is a beer we're going to be packaging up very soon here. This is our Dudeism. This is a White Russian Stout. If you're familiar with White Russians, which I personally love. A lot of the coffee beers that we tend to fall in this overall level of coffee. Very intense, very upfront.
Yeah, I mean, the nose is all coffee. Yeah, trying to replicate that Kahlua. But I'm definitely getting the lactose. I'm guessing you guys put lactose in here.
Yeah. Yep.
Lactose, cocoa nibs, white
You literally
chocolate.
put white chocolate chips in the was it in the mash or in the boil?
Really?
Boil.
So here's the thing: is this beer? Oh. So the thing about the beer that you guys are tasting is it's actually got a fair amount of sweetness.
Yeah.
However, this beer finished out at like 10, 12.
Oh, okay.
So it's super dry. So like where a lot of that residual sweetness is coming from the chocolate that we added. So like the white chocolate in the boil and the cocoa nibs, but most of it's coming from that white chocolate.
Oh, this is very interesting.
What was the coffee that we used on
A
this
lot of
one?
coffee.
We used the Kona blend coffee.
Okay. So a little bit different coffee. I mean, we use different coffees for different beers, so obviously they're going to all be a little bit different.
What was that coffee again?
It was a
Kona blend?
Kona blend coffee.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice. So this would be considered a white stout or an albino stout?
Here's the problem with a lot of the beers that we brew is that they don't traditionally fit into a style. So when we say a
I
white,
don't think anything you make has fit a style.
Yeah. We got a gold medal in the American fruited sour category, oak aged American fruited sour category. So yeah, that's a style.
So, yeah.
But that was just 1 out of 500. So yeah, you're right.
as far as being a true like white stout, yeah, that's just a little bit darker than what you would call
Right.
for like a pale stout.
But
However,
I mean, the additions you have in here, the coffee, the chocolate, and the boil, and that would be literally impossible to get at any probably lower.
Yeah, I can see where you guys are going White Russian on this. It's, that nice chocolatey flavor and
All the
some of
flavors
the
are there
coffee
for it.
of the Kahlua. Yeah.
And the
well,
sweetness.
there's also vanilla in there as well. So.
Yeah, and that along with the lactose is giving that nice
Boy,
creamy
this is
feel.
really drinkable.
That's fun.
I imagine
Yeah.
at 113
I mean, mine's-
final, this is
Mine's gone already.
Yeah,
This
we were
is gonna be
talking
big trouble.
We were talking about how we didn't want our beer to be a dessert beer, but this is along those lines. This is
Yeah.
a nice after dinner, having dessert with some friends kind of a beer.
So
Then everyone will be
as
asking
far
for
as-
more.
Oh yeah.
So definitely, I think as far as coffee goes, like this is way above and beyond what you guys would be looking for. This is pretty intense in terms of coffee. So
Yeah,
what we could
it's
do
really
is,
strong.
Yeah. So one of the way we get that really intense coffee flavor is what we'll do is we'll just basically pasteurize coffee grounds. We'll pasteurize them up to 180 degrees for 5 minutes, and then we just dump them into the top of the fermenter, recirculate the fermenter, and then we let it sit no longer than 48 hours. Because if it sits any longer on that coffee, it's going to start to leach out tannins, and it's going to become really astringent and really
Yeah.
bitter, and nobody likes that. So
No.
that's our standard method. For this beer, we could use that method in just half our dosing rate, because right now we're throwing in, a little over a pound. We're throwing in about 1.25 pounds of coffee per barrel. And so we could easily bring that much, much lower and bring that more into balance if we still want that strong aromatic. It depends on what kind of coffee flavor you guys are looking for. If you
So
guys
is
are
that
looking
the
for,
amount that was used for this one?
Yeah, we used about 40 pounds we used 40 pounds in a 30 barrel batch.
Yeah, because we want to be sure to not overwhelm the complexity
Yep.
of the malt bill, right? So I mean, that's
Yep.
the whole point of having that malt bill, is to allow the malts kind of rely a lot of those flavors. We want that coffee to kind of harmoniously sing with it, not just say, coffee.
Yep.
If we were doing a coffee beer, that would be great, but that's not what we're doing here.
It should complement that base beer, not
Do you guys, so
overtake it.
Yep.
there are two ways we can add coffee to the beer, and they'll give two very different flavor profiles. One is you can add it in during the whirlpool or very, very late in the boil. And what you'll do is you'll get a lot more of that roasted character, that baseline flavor from the coffee coming through, drive off a lot of the aromatics, which is, like that. One of the things is with this beer is we've managed to retain a very strong fraction of the aromatic compounds of the coffee. So that's one way you can do it. The other way is the way I just described, and that'll retain a lot of the volatile aromatics inside the coffee. So it depends on what you guys are going for. The volatile aromatics are going to be a lot better at clouding the rest of that beer up, because it's like those aromatics are just so intense. It's going to be really hard to get past a lot of the other facets.
That's a
of the
lot
beer.
of the taste, though. That smell. You know.
Yeah.
It's better. I think.
Like in this, all I smell.
Yeah,
is
it's
the
going to be better
coffee.
if we put it at the end.
Yeah, in the whirlpool.
Yeah, in the whirlpool.
Well, take the batshit crazy too, because that's the same addition method, correct?
Is that a whirlpool edition?
No, that is not a whirlpool edition.
No, the same addition as the Dudeism.
Oh,
But
okay,
that's
so
just the
it's a
difference
secondary?
Gotcha.
in a volume amount of it. So that's the same way that's how I would picture the coffee notes being in here, where you still get that coffee, aroma definitely, but it's subdued, and then that coffee flavor is something that we want in this beer, because where we were thinking it was lacking a little bit was in that roast coffee character, anyways. So personally, I would like to see the addition, like the batshit crazy, maybe stepped back, 25% less coffee. Per proportion, obviously we're making a bigger, thicker, more viscous beer, but I'd like to see that coffee aroma and coffee mouthfeel. On the beer versus just the roast of the coffee.
This is where it can get really interesting, because then we can use even different roasts of coffees to impart certain flavors. So obviously, a higher roasted coffee is going to kick out a lot more roasted character, and adding less or lighter roasted coffees will add different levels. Like for example, the Kona blend. That adds, you can't really taste it in this beer, but in other beers we've tried it with, it'll lend a slightly juicy character, just because of the way the beans are roasted. And that's you drink coffee and it can be juicy, it can be roasty, it can be, you can get all these flavors out of it. And depending on what kind of coffee we even use, what kind of level of roast we use, we can pull all these different flavors out of it. And it doesn't have to be all one or all the other. I mean, it can be a combination. The coffee that we use for Batshit Crazy is specifically a 50-50 blend between dark roasted coffee and lighter roasted coffee for that reason, so we can bring in that complexity.
Yeah,
So what do we want?
For me, I'm always a big South Pacific kind of coffee guy, the Sumatran, the Indonesians, because of the...
I'm Guatemalan all the way.
Well, see, the Central Americans with the volcanic soil really impart a bright, acidic kind of flavor, and... But you get the more roasted notes because you generally roast a Sumatran darker. Boy, I wish we know what we need is a 2018 Sump, because they're doing a single origin Costa Rican for their beer, and
I just didn't want too much coffee.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted just that hint.
Yep.
It's hard to describe it because you want that hint of coffee and you want the hint of maple. Just you wanted that base beer to be the star. And what I tasted right now, that's a really good base beer.
Yep.
I really like that.
So we just don't
If
want to
we
water it down too much.
Right.
Yeah.
I just don't want this coffee to be overpowering. You know?
yeah. So
I
maybe
mean, we can easily download we could do even a quarter or less than a quarter of what we do normally for these other beers, because these other beers call for a fair amount of coffee flavor and aroma attached to them. But
Yeah, I'd
we
say
can greatly reduce that and do the same method we normally do. Instead of using a pound per barrel, we could use a quarter pound per barrel, or whatever we feel would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on the coffee we go. If we do a Central American, we don't want to dial it too back just because of the brightness in the city itself, and generally lesser roasted coffee.
I didn't think the coffee part would be the toughest part. Holy shit! Because I'm thinking about it. Yeah,
But-
I
but
love
you can see it
coffee
really
and I
pop,
love the
though.
smell, but when I had the vision I had for this beer was not that.
Yep.
Well, I think we all love the aroma of the batshit crazy. I mean, the coffee comes at you at waves. I don't know that we need it necessarily that strong, but I love how the coffee hits you first. It hits the nostrils, and that's immediately what you're tasting when you taste the beer. So I think we want a lot of coffee-forward flavors, but then,
You want it to fade away pretty
immediately
quickly.
fade
Yep.
away, yeah. Which is, tough to do. We're challenging you guys quite a bit.
That's purely a matter of how much we add. That's literally, it's just a direct correlation to how much coffee we add per unit of beer, and that will have a direct impact on how quickly, how much it sticks around, or how quickly it fades away.
Yeah, so we should definitely dial it back.
Yep. I'm thinking
Significantly.
to move on to the fenugreek and all stuff. What I would propose, and I think this is just, is we'll go with the Batshit Crazy Coffee Edition method, something similar where we can use both a light and a dark roast, because we do want to amp up a little bit of the roast in the body and then also get it on the nose. But I'd like to see that, per proportion, per ABV, probably 30% of what's in batshit, maybe 50% of what's in batshit.
I would probably start off doing 20%, 15 to 20% of what's normally there, and then we can always add more from there.
True.
But we can start off, what I can do now is we have a whole other carboy of this beer in the fridge. We can do that coffee edition, throw it in there, let it sit for another few days, rack it off, and then you guys can come back and try it and see where you guys think we're at with that beer.
Yeah, that would be
Knowing
great.
that it's
Great
already
idea.
sweet, and the coffee, imagine it being a little bit dried out, but the coffee is also going to add some roasted character in there. So it's going to dramatically change the character of the beer, even from what you guys are tasting right now.
Yep.
Does that sound good, Jim?
Cool.
Yeah, that would be fantastic because I'm pretty good at visualizing, but proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Hopes and dreams, smoking
Yeah.
beer or something.
That's how we roll here on the Tap Takeover Podcast.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Right.
So we're going to add 15 to 20% of the amount of batshit crazy coffee in the same method.
Yeah.
The pilot batch.
Just the total
And then
amount of
come
coffee.
out
Yeah, because again, we're really looking for it to be complementing.
Yeah. You
not-
guys, you want the beer to be the star, and that's
Yeah.
complete.
Yeah.
You want it to be very complimentary.
And especially since tasting it, I feel strongly about that now.
Yeah.
Because this is, it's really good. It's,
Yeah, I think this beer's going to be a star. Yeah. And so we don't want to go too crazy with those adjuncts. Absolutely.
What I would recommend just out of the starting gate is, as far as like the base coffee additions go, I am a big fan of using like using a specific blend of coffee
Sure,
to achieve
yeah.
a certain flavor profile. And my thought would be maybe doing 75% like dark roast, like a French roast coffee to bring out that roasted character, and then a 25% like lighter roasted, either Sumatran or other whatever coffee you like, lighter roasted, and then we can try that and see how we feel, how that impacts the overall character of the beer.
So you think a mixture of the two instead of just scaling back the amount of coffee?
Well,
Yeah,
both.
it's always
It'll
a
be-
mixture.
it'll
You know,
be
you're-
both.
It'd be both, yeah.
Your dark roasts are going to give you a lot of your flavor, and your light roasts give you a lot of the aroma. This with the Dudeism, that was heavy on the coffee aroma, subdued on the flavor a little bit.
Yep.
And unless I'm just making shit up.
No. So it's really when you
I always got to
roast.
check with him when he gives me that look, but that's his look always.
Next on the Coffee Takeover Podcast, when you roast a coffee to a dark roast, it really boils off a lot of the volatile aromas, but you impart that roast flavor. So when you let it roast it, you're going to get a lot of that bouquet in there.
Awesome. Well, I think we've come to some decisions on the coffee. So that's the first part done.
Rabbit hole check.
Excellent.
We still got some work to do, though. We're gonna do this little taste with the fenugreek and some of the maple syrup, and then see how that goes. And it may even change our decisions on the coffee. That may still be up for grabs. But we're gonna take a little break right now, and we'll be back with some more beer to taste.
So, welcome back from the little break we took here at the Tap Takeover Podcast, and we're here with Andrew, and he's going to add some fenugreek to the base beer, and we're going to see how that turns out.
So, real quick disclaimer here, guys. I have never used fenugreek in beer ever. The only reason I even knew it was a thing was because Josh, one of our other brewers, used to work at a homebrew store, and he said that he ended up using fenugreek to impart maple-like flavor into a beer. So I'm doing this at his recommendation and his behest, but I have never done this before, so I apologize if it ends up tasting horrible.
Don't throw Josh under the bus.
This is your ass, Josh.
So I have verified that using fenugreek as kind of a maple substitute is a accepted technique amongst brewers, though it really hasn't been widely done, but it is popular with the home brewers.
Be careful. There's going to be some at the bottom there.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much time we might need to let the flavors impart there yet, but
So I'm definitely getting a difference on the nose, right? I'm
also getting a slight difference on the flavor even already.
All right.
It's actually taken away a lot of that sweetness. Like I'm feeling it's more rounded out. It's not quite as cloyingly sweet as I picked it up as before. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying that and clouding all of your opinions of the beer.
No, it definitely is imparting a different flavor. That's for sure.
Now, when in the process would you add fenugreek?
Right now, we're adding it in this stage of the process simply because I've never dealt with something like this before, and just tasting it kind of in its rawest form and putting it straight into beer gives me a fairly good idea of how it's going to act at a large scale. But if I were to do it, I would definitely add it in during the boil.
So this wouldn't be secondary?
It could be a secondary addition, but like I said, I
would
just
you
don't
get-
have enough experience with it to know what would be better. So I would, if we were going to do it at a commercial scale, I'd pilot it with like a couple of batches of wort first and do one way and do one the other way.
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
This would be
It might be better in the boil because it is a
Yeah.
little strong.
Yeah.
Here as kind of this secondary. Obviously hasn't time to. I mean, this is fresh, so normally you would give
Let
it
it
a few
steep a little
days.
bit.
Let it mellow out.
I'm getting like a micro. I don't know. Do you guys eat microgreens?
No, it's so it strikes me with a little bit of maple, and it could be the proportions that we're using. Again, it's an experiment, but I'm also getting like some black licorice kind of flavors going on.
Almost
There's,
fennel-like.
Yeah, exactly. Very aromatic, very herbaceous, which isn't quite what we're going for.
Yeah.
But I'm sure in the long run this is gonna.
And I don't know if that's
gonna
because
work
we've
out.
been talking about it, so I get the hint of maple, but it's just something that's different.
There is something.
It is
different.
definitely
Just something
different.
different
Let
that
me
I
tell you
can't.
something about beer. If the label says it's there,
Perception is reality, correct,
You ever had a
Henry?
chocolate
If the
stout?
label, if it says it's on the
Sometimes
label,
it's not
you're
even
going to have a
chocolate.
bunch of people complaining about how they didn't taste it in the beer.
We just recently had a peanut butter stout that had no peanuts or butter in it.
Was it super peanut buttery?
It was very peanut buttery.
Yeah, very
it was
biscuity.
Yeah,
The,
biscuit, a lot of diacetyl.
There's the yellow
but
belly.
It was done so well. It was a really fantastic beer.
Yeah, that was the yellow belly stouts and
Yeah.
the yellow belly sundae. Those are the two ones that we tried.
I can't take the
Interesting.
D as far as diacetyl goes. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care for that fenugreek that much.
It is interesting. I think we still need to see it
I
a
don't
little
know,
bit
it's-
mellowed out.
Yeah.
It's coming off a little strong right now.
And it's probably the part of the brewing process that you put it in might mellow it out a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's just hard to tell right now because we just
Yeah.
poured a spoonful into.
Yeah. So this is something that would require a little bit more experimentation. Like I said, I'd never worked with fenugreek before, so I just wanted to try it like straight up in the beer. And I think we all agree that like using that method, like late fermentation, just adding that in, probably isn't going to be like the best idea.
It couldn't be used as a replacement either for like the maple syrup would replace the brown sugar, right? The fenugreek you still have.
Yeah,
to
you-
have.
At low concentration. So that's the thing is like what I've been told and everything that everybody's told me is you can't use too much of this stuff. You have to use it at very low levels to get that maple flavor going. So like my thought would be maybe if we were going to do it, we can do, because you guys are going to have to come back here so we can try the coffee anyway. By then I can do a little bit of like a trial of wort with fenugreek added in the whirlpool and then added after it's already fermented. I can just do that in 1 gallon jugs and then we can try that and see where we think that fenugreek is. And I can do it in a drier beer so we can get a fuller expression of that and better easily able to translate all those flavors into a bigger viscous stout.
So, Jim, you actually said you did some homework that this was a.
Yeah, it is often used for homebrewers as a maple alternative because there are times and places you can't get maple syrup. And we're kind of blessed here to be like swamped with maple syrup at any time.
So when do they put it in? Like a home brewer, when would they put it in?
They generally do put it in during the boil.
Yeah, I think
rather
it'll-
than a secondary addition.
It'll be interesting because we will already have that maple syrup in there as kind of a baseline instead of the brown sugar. So we're really just using the fenugreek to kind of punch it up a bit, right?
Yep.
It just kind of
Absolutely.
just kind of complement those flavors that are already there.
Accentuate.
And the other thing is we don't know exactly how the fenugreek is going to play with the coffee. There could be an interesting interplay there. That's why it's such a fun and interesting ingredient. Is we're taking like a homebrew recipe and trying to scale it all the way up to 30 barrels. So it's an experiment, and I can't wait to find out how it turns out.
Well, should we try some maple syrup?
Yeah, let's try it.
All right.
All right, we've got beakers and we've warmed some things up, so it's full on experimentation time.
Every
Oh,
lab
that's
should
a
have a
graduated
microwave.
cylinder, Alex.
I assume he went in for a Bunsen burner.
This is a
that's-
beaker.
Get your implements correct.
So the first thing we're going to start off with is just 10% maple syrup and a 90% base beer just to try that and see. Because what that's going to help us figure out is okay, roughly how much maple syrup corresponds to how much actual flavor we get. If you guys, I don't know if you guys want to, but you guys can just pass this around real quick and taste or get a whiff of it just to get an idea.
Just take a hit.
Yeah.
Just take a.
If you want.
So just as we had the discussion on coffee, there are different varietals of maple syrups and grades. Do you guys tend to use grade A rather than, say, a darker maple syrup?
So grade A maple syrup is also the most expensive and most refined, and I can't remember exactly what defines grade A from grade B.
It's really
other
color.
than the price and color.
Well, it is really color. So your grade A is a little bit more refined, but it's not as burnt, and that's generally what the public wants.
It's
so
more caramelized.
it's kind
so
of
there's
like
more caramelization in
yeah.
grade A.
So it's really
Got it.
where when they boil it away, you have layers. So they take away the top layer, which is the least amount, and it's the least burned. And then as you get lower, it gets darker and darker and more that caramel flavor that goes down to B. And then and I haven't seen anything, I don't know if anyone's really done this experimentation, is would you get more of that maple flavor in the lower grade because it's more caramelized and like it's less fermentable?
The best way to figure that out, Andrew, and why don't we try it? Let's just ferment maple syrup and see what happens.
Different
Grade
grades.
A and grade B maple syrup. I mean, why not?
Maple vine.
You weren't doing anything else, were you, Andrew?
Andrew's
Just
like,
making our beer?
Fuck you guys.
In your free time.
So we're looking at 30 different batches for this 30 barrel.
Is there another room just for our stuff?
We're also going to want a sour version, just to just for shits and giggles.
And then let's do some with birch sap.
I thought somebody here in Wisconsin did that.
Well,
sap
Enlightened did maple sap.
Yeah, but there was another one I think that
birch
did
sap?
either maple sap or birch sap. There was another brewery up north. Maybe it was Stone Arch. I can't remember.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so it's going to be a little sweet, right? Because this
It
is
is definitely going to be
unfermented.
much sweeter, but like I can almost immediately pick out that maple syrup,
Yeah.
even at
Yeah.
5%. And like 5% is, or no, this is 10%. Sorry, I lied. This is 10%. This is not 5%.
And it's increased the mouthfeel quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's more
Yeah,
velvety. It's much smoother.
I think that's what you were going for, right,
Yeah,
Andy?
Exactly.
I can picture a little coffee flavor here too.
Fucking love this version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're all on the same page
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, I think the maple really does enhance this beer.
Yeah, pretty early on we were talking about some coconut adjuncts and some other things, but I
throw that
think,
shit right out
I
the
think this
window.
maple
Yeah,
is
does not
right
need
on
it.
point.
I think we just swap out the brown sugar entirely for maple
Yeah.
syrup, and I think we've got a bloody winner.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck
Yeah.
that brown sugar. This maple's great.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah.
4-hour discussion on the coffee. 30 seconds on the maple syrup.
So I guess what's the next step?
So the next steps are for me to actually try the coffee edition as we've described, and before I do anything, I'll shoot out an email to you guys telling you, hey, this is how much beer I have, this is how much I plan to add based off our existing dosing rates times, point, 1.5 or 0.2. Like, so we're doing like 15% of the coffee we would normally do. And so I'll send you guys an email out finalizing all those procedures. Early next week, I'll run the fenugreek trials, the coffee trial, and if I have time, maybe I can do maple syrup, but I think we're all pretty much universally in agreement that we rather see maple syrup instead,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
So the next step is, with the beer that we have, is doing the coffee edition, and then from there, just making sure that we have a beer that we're all comfortable with, and I think the coffee is going to play a huge role in that. So that's something that I want to make sure that we get locked down, because the maple syrup is going to be pretty easy. We can add it, like, even if we want to get more maple flavor, we can add it later on and during fermentation instead of during the boil. And we can still get a fair amount of maple flavor coming through while still getting it fully attenuated. But stuff like the coffee, I think, is going to be the biggest thing. And then if we decide we need to we can try the fenugreek and see if we want to add that at all to kind of boost that maple flavor.
Sweet.
Does that make sense? And does
Yeah.
that
Makes
sound
sense.
Yeah, because we'll want to see
So
how
next,
the maple and
next
fenugreek
time we'll
comes
do
in.
the tasting, and then you had brought up label design too.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you want
we'll
to wrap
definitely have
that
to
into
get
the same thing? Or?
some spitballing going on the labels. Will be really fun to have you sit down with Sam and Kayla too from our design team, and because they're just creative geniuses. I'll show you the Dudeism label, and you guys will like half shit your shorts because this is the craziest label ever. Sam's awesome. She's incredibly talented. Like, look at this Odesati can. Look at that little caribou reindeer-ish thing.
Yeah, we were
So,
talking about adjuncts
that'll be
before.
really fun
Let's talk about this new beer you guys have coming up. It will probably have come out by the time this episode comes out, but talk about some of the adjuncts in this Ode to Sati.
Yeah, Sati's a real fun beer. So Adam, who's one of our brewers and runs the Sour and Wild program, his official title when he first started was Director of Wood, which was kind of funny, but he changed it to Head of Barrel Operations. I think that was what was on his hiring
I think
documents. like
Head
his
of Wood
offer
would have
letter.
sounded even better.
Ridiculous. So, but he wanted to brew Sati, and we're like, what the hell's Sati? Like everybody should probably ask. But I kind of explain it as Sati is the finished version of what a Belgian farmhouse is. So you've got all your grains that are left over at the end of the season, a lot of unmalted wheat, a lot of unmalted barley, and traditionally this beer was filtered through pine boughs in hollowed out logs way back in the day.
Wow.
So they'd take spruce, and fold those pine boughs over, dump the mash down that to strain out all the liquid from the grain. So on a commercial scale, we did that by ripping out our mash tun filter bed, throwing a bunch of spruce that Adam chopped down from his farm underneath the filter, and we recirced the mash through all the pine and then threw a bunch of crushed juniper berries in it as well. So again, it's one of those ones that has some interesting adjuncts. It's something that all complements the beer. It's not like we're fermenting this beer and want it to taste like a pine needle, but it's leaning towards tradition, so that's why it's the ode to Sati. This is the second year brewing it, so we have on the 22nd of December we're launching last year's version, this year's version, a rum barrel aged version, which was in Twisted Path rum barrels, and then a red wine barrel aged lactic version. So it'll be the symphony of Satis coming out, which
Nice.
will all be like completely different and bizarre and distinct, but this is definitely one of my favorite, like, if you can close your eyes and imagine yourself walking through the pine forest, munching on a loaf of bread, it's the same thing as drinking this beer.
Or if you just love gin.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, some really interesting flavors there. Andy, what do you think? I know you. Sometimes the experimental ones don't land with you.
I'm not a fan of juniper berries to begin with, but I mean, it still tastes good. I like it.
Well, what's funny is this isn't actually technically an experimental style of beer. This is a historical style of beer. So this is beer that your great-great-great-great-great-grandpappies would have drank if they were from Norway.
I thought it was Finland.
Probably Finland.
Okay, cool. Well, can't wait to design a label with you guys next time. Taste the coffee editions, and then hopefully get a bunch of this beer in a bunch of people's mouths so they can enjoy it and give a big hearty cheers to all of them.
Do you have any preferences for coffee roasters, either local or otherwise, and also any specific roasts or blends of coffee?
Well, I mean, for me personally, I'm a big Anodyne fan.
Anodyne for sure.
Yeah,
I would
mean,
second that.
I've
I was
been
going to
a
say Anodyne if you
huge-
didn't say it.
Huge fan of Anodyne and have been for years. Like Hawthorne, I like Valentine. They're making really good beers, but to me, Anodyne is kind of old school Milwaukee.
And they're here. They're a couple blocks from here, so.
Yeah, we can all throw rocks and hit their building. They can
Yeah.
throw rocks back.
I like the idea if we can get them in the fold, proximity malt, these guys that are just close here.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the best.
Yeah, for me, as I said before, my preference is the South Pacific styles, but I think you're right that a good blend of probably some of the Central American, give it some acidity, some brightness, a little pop, and then the roasted notes from the Sumatran or Indonesian.
See, I don't want acidity at all. Like I don't want a hint of tartness that comes up in this.
I mean, depending on how we do it, it's going to be like, if we do 75 dark roast, 25 light roast, any acidity that's in there isn't going to come through. It's mostly just going to be the aromatics. Like,
I
there's
just
a
remember
lot
from
going
our
on in this
trials.
beer.
I mean, probably tried 30 different coffees for Batcha Crazy before we found them, and a lot of those more acidic coffees were
Just not working?
not complementing the overall flavor of the beer.
Yeah.
But just me, I'm just some measly peasant.
Yeah, I think overall, though, dark roast just kind of normalizes the terroir of the bean.
Do you have any preference? Because like when I think dark roast, normally my first thought is like French roast, but that might almost be too intense. But that depends.
It's a little
French
dark.
roast is very
I generally
polarizing.
like it at first crack, so that's a little less than a French. So I don't know really what the technical name of that roast is, but yeah,
I can
right
figure
when
it
it's
out.
about 428, 427
Yep.
temp roast.
We can lower that.
Yeah, so something a little less than a French.
Perfect.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, I think this is a great place to end it for this tasting, and we'll be back with another one. Who knows? At that point, we may have added cinnamon and vanilla, and we might have gone back to the coconuts. We're all
Henry's
over
like,
the place.
there's no
right now.
fucking way you're putting vanilla bean in this.
You guys
You want a
talk-
secondary ferment on Brett? And some
Hey, the black oil is awesome.
We may go full
cognac
sour.
barrels.
We may go full sour. By
I think
the time
Andrew
we
and
get back.
Henry are going to have an impromptu meeting. Like, I got to stop dealing with these guys.
We're
By the
just
way,
gonna take their name off.
We have some 25-year-old Knob Creek barrels just waiting for you guys.
Oh, really? You do?
He's full of shit.
Don't make promises I can't keep.
Henry's like, I'm saving that for the good beer.
But no, I think this is a great place to stop it for now, and we will be back with yet another tasting. This is an experiment in the works, and we're really happy to kind of bring you guys behind the curtain and see what this crowdsourcing actually looks like. So thank you to the guys from Mobcraft for having us, and
You bet.
we will be back with more. So for me, for Alex,
For Andy.
Jim, this is Andrew.
And for Henry.
And Jim.
Jesus.
this has been a Solid Non Fail Podcast.
Woohoo!